Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us.
Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is Dr. Ann DeSantis here. My co-host Bill Snyder isn't able to join us this time around, but we have an amazing podcast for you with a returning guest. We have author Tony Kolenc. Thank you so much, Tony, for being a guest on our program.
And it's so great to be back, and I really appreciate you talking to me again about my writing.
Yeah, I think you've been a guest several times, not only on this program, but also on my own podcast, Journeys in Faith with Ann DeSantis. And I love to start out with your bio, your beautiful bio, is that Tony Kolenc, known as Tony, is the author of 9 novels, including the latest release, Begotten, Book 2. That's the new book that we're going to be discussing during this podcast, in the Incarnate series published by Chrism Press. He's also the author of fiction for youth, including his middle grade novel, Penny and the Stolen Chalice. I know we've talked about that before on the podcast, and his teen historical fiction series, The Harwood Mysteries, which won, little technical difficulty there, which won over 15 book awards. He is also the host of the Shepherd's Pie radio show and podcast. He retired as Lieutenant Colonel from the U.S. Air Force Judge Advocate General Corps after 21 years of military service. He currently teaches law at Ave Maria School of Law, and he's speaking and writing legal and homeschool events. That's what you do a lot of times, is doing events for legal and homeschool events. Tony and his family live in Florida. So tell us a little bit more about you. I mean, that's the bio. Sorry if I messed up a few things there. But I know there's so much more to you just in your bio. Tell us more about you, your family, and the writing that you do.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, my wife and I have 5 kids. They're all grown up now. In fact, we're expecting our 4th grandchild this summer, so that's exciting. And I down in Naples, Florida, at Ave Maria School of Law. I've been a law professor since I retired from the military in 2012. Ave Maria has me I'm directing their veterans and service members law clinic. So we represent veterans in different kinds of cases, and the students will do the work under my attorney license, and I'll work with them and pretty much teach them how to be lawyers by doing the real deal, working with actual clients and cases and supporting our veterans in all different kinds of legal issues they get. But on the side, as you know, and the times I come and talk to you is really about my side gig as an author. And as you said, we've talked in the past. God has been so good to me as far as Loyola Press has my 6-book Harwood Mystery series, which is that medieval series going back for teens, and I'm very honored that that series has done so well. And then I've got that one book from our Sunday Visitor that you mentioned, Penny and the Stolen Chalice, and that's even for a younger audience, really kind of 2nd through 5th grade. But the series that we're talking about today is not for kids, not for younger teens. This is an adult series that covers really adult issues and really serious and kind of difficult issues. Thankfully, I'm with Chrism Press, which is a great Catholic publisher, and they are exceptional at making sure that I kind of stay on the right path in kind of the speculative supernatural area that I'm writing about.
Yeah, that's amazing. You've done so much and balanced a great deal too with your children and the new grandchild on the way, as you said, your wife, all the great work that you're doing. And actually, we're taping this in February of 2026, where I have lots of snow on the ground and you're there in Florida. So that's another topic of discussion, right? That you're in beautiful Florida. I'm sure that I know you had your share of some not so great weather though this year over the last couple weeks, right? But I'm sure
True.
it's
I'm
sunny
from New
again.
Jersey originally, and in fact,
Oh, that's right.
I've been back a bunch because my mother's been ill a little bit. So I've
Mhm.
been visiting significantly up in New Jersey. I've caught 3 snowstorms this season already. I'm not a stranger to the snow.
Oh, okay. That's right. I did now remember that New Jersey connection because you're familiar with where my area too in Philadelphia. So this is an amazing book that you have that we're going to discuss, Begotten Book Two. And to tell us, how did the idea for this book come about, and give us like the basics of actually what it is about.
Yeah, so this is the Incarnate series is a trilogy. I'm actually literally today, as we're speaking, trying to pen the last few chapters of book 3. And so I'm finishing the series. Book 2 is, of course, our middle book, and that just came out in February of 2026. But the concept for the series was what would happen if someone were to clone Jesus Christ? And who would do that? How could they possibly do it technologically? What kind of diabolical plan would they have to want to do something as evil and blasphemous as trying to clone Jesus? And what if you were the person who found out you were the clone or the alleged clone? Because it's not clear that that's exactly what's going on here. But so that's what happens in the story. It's a book 1, which came out in 2025. It's just called Incarnate. And it starts with a 17-year-old senior in high school, Joshua Christensen, living in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, with his best friend Rachel, who he has a terrible crush on, but she friend zoned him in the ninth grade. And essentially, they are confronted at the beginning of book 1 by a government agent, Agent Sampson, who says, essentially, I'm here to protect you because you're not who you think you are. And so that kind of unleashes total chaos in Joshua's life and Rachel's life, actually, as they are, running from a lot of different threats throughout all of book 1. As you can imagine, if you are supposedly cloned from Jesus, and this is a supernatural thriller, it's kind of speculative psychic fiction, if you will. So there's a lot of kinds of things that you might find. I like to think of it like if you ever read Stephen King's Firestarter or something like that, where you've got the plausible world of, what kind of capabilities do people have? But set in sort of in modern times. This is actually set in the early 2000s. Book 1 is 2007, and book 2 is 2012. So you can imagine, like, what would happen if you found out that you supposedly were this clone? Who would be interested in you? And so book 1 is, the government's after Joshua to test him. He's got these, the diabolical group that cloned him is trying to create him to be something, horrible and horrific, some sort of an antichrist type figure that they're hoping to create from him. Meanwhile, he's got people who think he's an abomination who needs to be killed. And he's just trying to figure out what the heck's going on. I thought it was just like a regular senior in high school. And so book 1 was a lot of fun to write, but that's the premise. And then book 2, we could talk about more on this. But book 2, fast forwards 5 years after book 1.
Wow. I like hearing about how you come up with these ideas because I myself, I mean, I have some creativity in me, but maybe to not to this extent. So, uh, put us into your mind. What are you doing when you formulate these characters? And also maybe tell us when you're writing the book and you're thinking about what your goal is toward the end, uh, wh like what direction, how does the Holy Spirit lead you? Like in for instance, do you know when you start a book that you're going to be doing another one to follow up with it? Or do you already know when you begin it that, hey, this will be an ending and then I'll start a new series after this? Like, just give us an idea of how that works in your mind.
Yeah. It's as most authors, they probably have several manuscripts sitting in drawers. I still have a few manuscripts that I wrote years ago that have not seen the light of day because they're just not ready for prime time yet. So this book 1, Incarnate, was sort of like that. I had written it originally in 2017, but because it's such a controversial premise, I was like, I don't even know if this is a book that I should write, and if I do write it, it's going to have to be multiple books because you can't just do it in one. And so, this was while the actually, gosh, I think I wrote book one of this before book one of the Harwood Mysteries was actually published by Loyola in 2020. Um, so there was, a long time that this book was ruminating in my brain, and I wasn't sure, I needed to find the right publisher. And again, I wasn't even positive because it's kind of a bizarre idea, but it's actually not that bizarre when you think about the world, like the things that we're doing in science and technology, and the lack of concern about human ethics and human dignity that we've seen in history, just dealing with scientific experiments. You can be sure, like when I did research for this book, even back in the 90s, they were, dealing with cloning issues with, they cloned Dolly the sheep, that was the big first cloning thing. And then there was all this weird stuff that I found about people who are trying to clone kids, or clone, if you lost a child, we'll clone, basically another one to replace the one you lost. And there's all this crazy stuff. And that's like in the real world. So you can be sure if it was possible to clone Jesus, somebody would do it. And it's really just a matter of figuring out, well, how would somebody be able to do it? And then surely nobody could be up to any good if that's what they wanted to do. It would have to be something diabolical going on in the background. So those were some of the thoughts that kind of were just ruminating in my brain. And I was praying about it. I was like, the idea came to me, well, what if you were the kid who found out you were the clone? That could be interesting, especially if you're just like a regular person. You're not a bad person, but now you're being told these things. And so that was sort of what got me thinking. And again, I prayed about it a lot. I struggled a lot, like, do I really want to do this? But what I love about it is it's a great story because as far as like a supernatural thriller goes, it has everything that anybody would ever want in a story. It's got bad guys, evil, good, government agencies, psychic powers, teenage and then young adult, young love, a clean romance. Like it's got everything that like you'd want to have in just like a really interesting story. But it's not just a regular story because you can actually grapple with things like the divine and human natures of Christ, and
Mm.
free will, and human dignity, and are people who were created in ways that were evil. Are they evil, or can they be good? Are they still loved by God? Like all of these themes just naturally grow out of this kind of a story. And that's what I really loved about it, was I can talk about just about anything related to faith and religion and Catholicism. And it's all in the context of a story that it's totally natural to have those things come up. And so that was kind of my thought. Let's, have a great story kind of in this bizarre, original kind of a, area, but also be able to tackle kind of some big picture theological themes.
I love the fact that it exercises the mind in that critical thinking, especially as it relates to our faith and asking those very important questions, as you said. And you can't help but ask them as you're reading it. You cannot help but think these things and question, and maybe want to do more research about your faith and what you know about it. And and like I said, those critical thinking questions. And you said that this book is geared for adults. So would you say that it's for anybody over the age of 18 and older?
Yeah, look, our kids, unfortunately, are being exposed to horrendous things, even in their young years. But if I were like a mid-aged teenager, 15, 16, like this book's out by a Catholic publisher. There's no vulgarities, there's no explicit sex scenes or anything like that. There is some violence, and there is some really darkness because it's exploring some evil concepts. And so there's definitely some adult situations that come up, but they're handled in a way that a Catholic publisher can, look themselves in the mirror and put out. But like, I wouldn't want like little kids reading this book. I would think, once you're a middle age, teenager in high school, you can handle stuff like this because unfortunately they're being exposed to a lot worse than this. But
Yeah.
and some parents, obviously are just more protective than others in this area. So it also probably depend on, the parental units involved. But no, I wrote it mostly for like a college age kind of
Okay.
audience and above, is really the thought.
I see someone reading this book. I know for myself, I do a lot of reading when I have to travel. Say I'm in the airplane for several hours and hey, I got a book now. Or a weekend where, I mean, there's lots of snow on the ground here right now where I'm not going out. I have some free time and, I have a couple hours to spare and it's a perfect time to read. And so, and then we got summer coming up too, right? I mean, we're in February right now. I mean, this is a great summer read too, isn't it?
These
Um,
are, yeah, definitely. These are page turners because
mm,
they're not that long. A few hundred pages long, like 84,000 words or something. So it's not like War and Peace. The chapters are short, 2 to 4 pages each chapter, and the points
okay.
of view kind of change from characters. And there's just a lot of interesting action type things going on that bring you from one scene to the next. So it's something that you can get through actually fairly quickly, I think, both of the books and even the third one I'm writing now. I think you could, if you're a voracious reader, you could voraciously read this book for sure. On a vacation, on a few plane rides for sure. And that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be like a story that you're just like, what? I just need to find out what's about to happen next now. And so you just want to keep going.
And you mentioned you're writing the third one right now. When will that one be coming out?
Next year, I've got to, hopefully my
Okay.
publisher's not going to yell at me. I'm a little behind. It's been a challenge, like you mentioned, faith and this kind of thing. And I have actually a master's in theology and Christian ministry from the Franciscan University of Steubenville. But I'm no great theologian by any means. I teach at a Catholic law school too. But I learned a lot just trying to grapple with some of the things for this book. Book two, for instance, Begotten, which is the one that just came out, um, takes up the theme of Adam and Eve in the garden and this whole theological discussion that's out there about infused knowledge of the universe and the various gifts that Adam and Eve were given in the Garden of Eden. And the reason that it comes up is because if you have somebody who is the clone of Jesus, there's a whole theological discussion out there about did Jesus have the same gifts that Adam and Eve had in the garden? And if you were the clone of Jesus, then wouldn't you wind up having those same gifts? And if not, why wouldn't you have them? These are things I'd never thought about, even in any of the thing I encountered at Steubenville. But I was sort of forced to confront, and thankfully I have some friends who are much more theological than me. And so they would bring up questions. Well, what about this? And what about that? And I'd be like, that's a great thing. I guess I need to put that in the book somewhere. And so there's a lot of things that I learned, that's why I love this topic, because you start thinking about what it means for Jesus to have a human nature and what does a human nature even mean? And of course, a lot of this is speculative, and I'm trying not to be blasphemous or heretical in this, which is why I went with a Catholic publisher so they could kind of keep me honest.
Hmm.
But what does it even mean if you had Christ's human nature? Because if you did clone Jesus, which I think is plausibly possible if you had an access to his blood, if you did clone Jesus, what would you have? Like you wouldn't have his divine nature. You can't clone divinity, so you would have sort of like the pure human nature of Christ, or at least his DNA. And what would that look like? And there's like just so many interesting speculations that you can have, even if you were just sitting around a table theologically talking to a bunch of Catholic theologians about the topic without even bringing up all of the drama and the thriller.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Admittedly, I have not read the book yet, so I would look forward to reading it and invite people because this is a great summer read. And if you're traveling, like Tony said, it doesn't take that long to read the book. It's a page turner. And now, is it available on both formats? So it's obviously paperback and Kindle. Will it be available also on audiobook too?
Yeah, they have ebook and paperback, and
Okay.
they do not have it on audiobook. Although I'll be honest, I've started using one of these services that you can just plug in any book into it, and it will read it to you with all the different voices. I was listening to Barack Obama's voice and some Gwyneth Paltrow. So I have all the celebrities reading me my stories nowadays, even without audiobooks. So I guess audiobooks may be a thing of the past eventually, but no, Chrism does an ebook and a paperback version, and they're both really well done too. The folks at Chrism are actually super professional too, which is great.
Good. Yeah. I'm an author too. And you're right. The publisher makes a big difference too, as far as just helping you along the way, unless you're going to publish a book on your own. But I see that with what you're doing, that was a great decision to go with a Catholic publisher, especially with the kind of content that you're writing. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience about the book and about sharing it with others? Is this something that could be discussed in say like a book study, maybe with a
Oh,
group of young
absolutely.
people?
Yeah, definitely. And especially for young people who don't, are just kind of still grappling with the idea of Jesus and faith. And, there's a lot of kind of this, I'm a young person struggling with belief, because Joshua actually is struggling with belief, even though he is starting to get convinced that he might actually be the clone of Jesus. The one or two things I would add that I haven't mentioned yet is, you haven't asked me, well, how is it possible to clone Jesus? And so that
Yeah,
was the
tell
other
us.
wrinkle that I put into here in book one, that becomes a big plot point in book two, is I have a fictional miracle, a Eucharistic miracle. Those of you who are Catholics and follow Eucharistic miracles know that throughout history, there have been some very well documented miracles where the bread and wine of the altar turn into the actual body, blood, flesh and blood of Jesus. And so book one kind of starts with one of these miracles, where there's a Eucharistic miracle, where there's actual blood spilled upon an altar cloth from one of these miracles, and that's where they get the blood to clone. So book two actually takes up this theme, because part of the issue is, do we really know that this was a real miracle, or is it possible that this was something else? Maybe that's just part of some giant fraud. And so there's a big portion of book two that really is exploring kind of, what is the truth behind this supposed miracle that created you anyway. But that's the other neat thing I love about the series, is it allows you to kind of talk about Eucharistic miracles and what those are, and the fact, when I went to Italy a few years ago, I went to Lanciano, which is like the most
Yeah.
well documented and researched Eucharistic miracle in history. Took place in the Middle Ages, and they've done scientific experiments, and you can still go and see it. Like, you could see the flesh and the blood there at Lanciano of this miracle, and it was remarkable. And that's the other reason I think it was going through my head at this time was, well, if wouldn't that be neat if you could use something like that to do a cloning experiment? But I didn't want to use a real miracle because, again, I'm trying to avoid blasphemy as much as I can. So, so that's kind of part of the plot points in book two. He's 5 years older. He is essentially in hiding from all the horrible things that happened in book one. He's still grappling with, who am I and what does this mean? And he encounters, the other thing that I'll mention is, he encounters church authorities in book two, because you might imagine, and the book takes place, this whole series kind of takes place, books two and three, in between the pontificates of Benedict and Francis, um, and book three actually is going to take place literally in the month after Benedict abdicates the papacy before they elect Francis. So we don't even have a sitting, pope at that point, which is kind of interesting. But you can imagine church authorities would be very concerned if somebody was walking around claiming that they were supposedly cloned from Jesus, and so that also allows me to kind of do the parallel of this guy's life, Joshua, with the actual, Jesus. And so you can parallel his early life in book one. Book two sort of parallels his ministry, his public ministry. And then book three is going to kind of hit into the passion and I don't know, maybe the resurrection. We'll have to see.
Wow, lots of good things are coming with this book. And I would like to invite the audience to go on Amazon and just look up the book, Begotten Book 2 by Anthony Kolenc. And you also have a website, and I know you might want to mention the link there so that people can go directly to your website to learn more too. What is your website?
Yeah, it's my full name, antonykolenc.com. There's no H in Anthony.
Hmm.
And yeah, on my website, I mean, it's really kind of a one size fits all website. It has all my professional and writings on there. So there's links to every all my writings are on there. Chrism Press also has you can get the books directly from Chrism Press. And like you said, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the usual places you can get it online.
Is it chrismpress.com? Is that the website?
I
I
believe
just
that's
guessed. I don't.
actually their website. I
Okay.
have
Or
to
you could
double
Google Chrism Press,
check.
but
Yeah, Chris, CHRISM. I believe
okay.
that's prismpress.com. But
Awesome.
yeah, they've been excellent. And the book covers are really pretty engaging, and everything they've done has been great.
Awesome. Well, it's good to see that you're continuing with your writing, even though you're a pretty busy person, I would say. But you're keeping that part of your talents alive and continuing to be creative and also faithful and spreading the gospel through this wonderful work that you're doing. So I congratulate you. We congratulate you because this isn't just my podcast. This is the Patchwork Heart Ministry YouTube channel with Bill Snyder, who is the founder of that ministry. He is my co-host, and we've been doing this since 2020. And we did take a little bit of a break. Bill's a new dad. And so he's been a pretty busy guy lately with a lot of different things that he's doing. And
Yeah,
so we,
I appreciate that you and Bill are taking the time.
Mhm.
I've had both of you on my podcast, and I think the last time I talked to Bill, he was talking about the Shroud of Turin documentary that he was working on. And just as an aside, there are some other times where other authors haven't conceived of cloning Jesus, and it's usually like the Shroud of Turin that they go to try to find Jesus's DNA for this kind of a thing. So that's another way to go about it. I didn't take that, but yeah, I would appreciate just your prayers and support. This is such a, in some ways, such a difficult series to write because it is kind of on this kind of controversial cutting edge, and I really don't want faithful readers to be shy of reading it. But even if you don't read it, please pray that the series does good and gives glory to God. As its premise is not meant to take anything away from God or Jesus, but to actually help stimulate some actual adult thought about these topics.
Mm, I agree. I really do agree. That's a good word to like stimulate those thoughts, the critical thinking skills having to do with our faith. So thank you for your good work. And a big shout out to, again, Bill Snyder. Please do subscribe to the Patchwork Heart Ministry YouTube channel. Bill Snyder is also the liaison for the Catholic Charismatic Renewal of the Archdiocese of Milwaukee and the executive director of Good News Ministries. He's a board member of the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith, where I serve as executive director. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, Tony. And we will see you next time here on the Sowing Hope podcast. Tony, do you have any final words before we end?
No, just thank you, and thank you, Ann, for your ministry and Bill's ministry and bringing these types of issues to your listeners.
Thank you. God bless. And we will see you all next time on the Sowing Hope podcast on Patchwork Heart Ministry YouTube channel. God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and DeSantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or DeSantis 2.